I asked them to seek you here. The sentence landed so casually that for a second I thought I had misheard him. I turned toward the man beside me, while the wedding reception glittered around us in gold light, soft music, and approximately $400 worth of flowers per table. You did what? I asked. Julian Mercer looked completely calm, which felt unfair considering my brain had just tripped over itself. He was older than me by at least 15 years, maybe more, with dark hair touched by gray at the temples, a tailored charcoal suit, and the kind of composed expression people probably trusted with mergers, divorces, and international emergencies. I had known him for exactly 7 minutes. Or at least I thought I had. I asked the bride's brother if the seating chart could be adjusted, he said. I stared at the little ivory card in front of me. Caleb Morgan. Table 12. Right beside Julian Mercer. Why? His eyes met mine. Because I wanted to talk to you. That should have been flattering. It was not. It was the conversational equivalent of finding a second door inside your closet. Most people start with hello. I considered that. And somehow rearranging a wedding reception seemed less strange. A faint smile appeared. In retrospect, no. I looked toward the dance floor, wondering whether my friend Stephanie knew she had accidentally seated me inside a mystery novel. Then Julian moved my water glass 2 inches away from the lily centerpiece. I noticed immediately. Why did you do that? He paused. The flowers bother you. My shoulders stiffened. How would you know that? His expression changed. Barely. But I saw it. I remembered. From when? Silence. There it was again. That tiny pause people make when the truth is standing directly behind them holding a sign. I leaned back in my chair. Have we met before? Not properly. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I picked up my drink just to give my hands something to do. That answer created more questions than it solved. Julian nodded. I expected it would. A server passed with a tray of appetizers. Julian glanced at the bourbon on my side of the table. Still neat. I stopped moving. What? Your bourbon. He immediately looked like he regretted speaking. My stomach tightened. 3 things. The seat. The lilies. My drink. Coincidence had officially clocked out for the evening. Julian. Yes. How much do you know about me? His fingers rested against the edge of the table, perfectly still. More than I should. My pulse jumped. Around us, guests laughed and toasted and took pictures while I sat beside a man who apparently possessed a private collection of facts about my life. That is a deeply unsettling answer. I know. You say that like you have practiced this conversation. His gaze dropped for half a second. I have. I almost laughed because apparently panic had decided sarcasm was my emergency contact. Wonderful. So I am improvising while you have rehearsal notes. Julian finally looked uncomfortable. Good. At least one of us was joining reality. I shifted in my chair and automatically chose the angle that kept the ballroom entrance in view. Julian noticed. Of course he did. You still prefer seeing the door, he said quietly. I froze. That was not public information. That was not something a wedding coordinator could have told him. I looked directly at him. Tell me the truth. Julian held my gaze for a long moment. Then he exhaled slowly. I will. Start with why I am sitting here. His expression settled into something serious. Because I knew you would be at this wedding, Caleb. My grip tightened around the glass. And I wanted one chance to stop watching from a distance and finally tell you why. For a moment, I just stared at Julian. Stop watching from a distance was not a phrase anyone wanted to hear from a man who had already admitted to rearranging a wedding seating chart. You are going to need to explain that very carefully, I said. Julian nodded once. I know. And if your next sentence contains the words coincidence or misunderstanding, I am leaving. It does not. Somehow that was worse. The reception continued around us with cheerful music and glasses clinking, which felt offensively normal considering my evening had apparently become a personal investigation. Julian reached inside his jacket. I immediately stiffened. He noticed and stopped. My phone, he said. I want to show you something. You could have started with that. May I? The fact that he asked slowed my thoughts for half a second. I nodded. Julian took out his phone, unlocked it, and placed it on the table between us instead of handing it directly to me. On the screen was a photograph. Me. I recognized the place immediately. A small coffee shop near Franklin Avenue where I used to work between client meetings. In the picture, I was sitting near the front window with my laptop open, one hand around a paper cup, staring outside like I had forgotten what I was supposed to be doing. When was this taken? I asked. Almost 2 years ago. My stomach sank. Did you take it? Yes. I looked at him. Without asking me. Yes. No excuse. No hesitation. Just an answer I did not particularly enjoy hearing. Why? Julian's eyes stayed on the photograph. Because that was the first time I saw you after I learned who you were. That sentence is doing very little to improve this situation. I understand. I picked up the phone and studied the image. I had never posted it. I knew that because I hated candid photographs of myself, especially ones where I looked like I was having an existential crisis over cold brew. How did you know who I was? I asked. Julian leaned back slightly, giving me more space. Someone told me about you. Who? A friend. That sounds intentionally vague. It is, for the moment. I narrowed my eyes. You arranged my seat, told me you have been watching me, showed me a photograph you took without permission, and now you want mystery points? A brief flash of embarrassment crossed his face. No, I am trying to tell this in the order it happened. Then continue. Julian nodded. I saw you at that coffee shop by accident. I recognized you from a description and a photograph someone else had shown me. And instead of introducing yourself, you photographed me. Yes. Excellent judgment. It was not. That stopped me. Julian was not defending himself. He was not trying to turn this into some romantic story where everything questionable became charming because he looked good in a charcoal suit. Did you keep watching after that? I asked. His silence answered before his mouth did. Yes. My fingers tightened around the phone. How often? Not constantly. I never followed you home. I never entered private places. But I saw you at public events, cafes, bookstores, and sometimes around downtown. Sometimes. More than I should have. I looked back at the photograph. The cheerful wedding noise felt farther away now. How many pictures are there? Julian's expression became serious. Caleb, how many? He reached toward the phone, but stopped before touching it. Open the folder beneath that photograph. I did. A folder appeared with my first name on it. My chest tightened. There were more images inside. Not hundreds, but enough. Me walking out of a bookstore. Me drinking coffee. Me talking with someone outside an art fair. Small pieces of ordinary life, collected without my knowledge. I put the phone down slowly. You did not arrange this seat just to meet me. Julian held my gaze. No, then why am I here? His answer came quietly. Because I decided tonight was the last time I was allowed to know things about you that you had never chosen to tell me. I looked at Julian for a long moment, trying to decide whether that sentence made things better or somehow worse. You decided tonight was the last time? I repeated. Yes. That sounds like you gave yourself a deadline for being creepy. His mouth tightened. That is fair. The fact that he kept agreeing with me was becoming irritating in a completely different way. I glanced back at the folder on his phone. The photographs were all public. Coffee shops, bookstores, an outdoor art fair, a farmer's market, me laughing with someone outside a restaurant. Nothing from my home. Nothing private. That mattered. It did not make it okay. Who told you about me? I asked. Julian leaned forward slightly, then seemed to think better of it, and stayed where he was. My friend, Daniel Reeves. The name meant nothing to me at first. Then something clicked. Daniel from the design conference? Julian nodded. 2 years ago. I stared at him. I remembered Daniel. Mid-50s, silver glasses. Terrible sense of direction. He had gotten overwhelmed after a panel, and somehow ended up sitting alone near the loading entrance while everyone else rushed to dinner. I had stayed with him until his assistant found him. We had talked about architecture, bad coffee, and how conferences made grown adults forget how elevators worked. That Daniel. Yes. He is your friend? For more than 20 years. I sat back. So he told you about me. He talked about you for weeks. I almost laughed. Why? Julian's expression softened. Because you stayed when you did not have to. The reception music shifted into something slower. Around us, people moved toward the dance floor. I barely noticed. I was just being decent. To you. Julian paused. To him, it mattered. I looked away because that answer landed somewhere uncomfortable. And then what? Daniel showed me a photo someone took at the conference. You were in the background. That is how you recognized me at the coffee shop. Yes. And that was when you started watching. Julian hesitated. That was when I started noticing. I looked back at him sharply. Do not soften the language now. His jaw tightened. You are right. That was when I started watching. Better. Still not good. Why did it continue? I asked. Julian looked down at his hands. For the first time all evening, He seemed less like a composed attorney and more like a man who had run out of polished answers. At first, I told myself I was curious about the person Daniel could not stop talking about. And after that, I kept seeing you. Coincidence? At first, yes. He paused. Later, not always. My stomach tightened again. Explain. I knew you sometimes attended public design events. I knew which bookstore hosted the talks you liked. I knew which coffee shop you worked from. So you went there hoping to see me. Yes. Without ever saying hello. Yes. I let out a slow breath. That is deeply strange, Julian. I know. Stop saying that. Sorry. I almost laughed despite myself, which was unacceptable timing. I pressed my lips together. Why did you not just talk to me? His eyes met mine. Because Daniel described you as kind, and I made the mistake of turning that kindness into something larger in my head before I knew you. I frowned. You built a version of me. Yes. And then you were afraid the real person would ruin it? Julian gave a small, humorless smile. More accurately, I was afraid I had already made myself impossible to explain. That answer was annoyingly self-aware. I picked up his phone again. Beneath several photographs were short notes. Not addresses. Not schedules. Just observations. Always orders tea when anxious. Stops to read plaques nobody else notices. Leaves early when rooms get too loud. My chest tightened. You wrote these too? Yes. Why? Julian looked at me with quiet shame. Because I was learning about you without earning the right to. I closed the folder. And tonight you arranged my seat because you finally felt guilty enough? Not only guilty. Then what? He took a slow breath. Because Daniel told me you would be here, and I realized I had two choices left. Tell you the truth and accept whatever you decide, or disappear from your life completely. I held Julian's gaze, and for the first time that evening, I understood how carefully he had built this moment. The seating chart, the timing, the rehearsed honesty. None of it was spontaneous. So this was planned, I said. Yes. You knew where I would be sitting, when I would arrive, and exactly when you wanted to tell me. Yes. I let out a short laugh that had no humor in it. That is not helping your case. Julian looked down. I know. I closed my eyes for a second. You are doing it again. Sorry. You keep agreeing with me like being self-aware somehow makes this easier. His expression shifted. It does not. Good. I leaned back, trying to organize the mess in my head. Part of me wanted to stand up and leave. Another part wanted every answer before I did. Curiosity was a terrible survival instinct, but apparently mine had excellent attendance. How did you arrange the seat? I asked. Daniel knows the groom's family. I asked whether the seating could be adjusted. Did you tell them why? No, what did you say? Julian looked almost embarrassed. That I needed to speak with you about something personal. That is incredibly vague. It was intentionally vague. I stared at him. So nobody here knows what you have been doing. No, the answer should have comforted me. Somehow, it made the whole thing feel more private, more deliberate. And you thought trapping me beside you at dinner was the best way to confess? His face tightened. I did not think of it as trapping you. Of course you did not. I stood. Julian immediately stayed seated. He did not reach for me. He did not ask me to stay. That gave me room to breathe. Caleb, he said quietly, if you want to leave, I will not stop you. I looked down at him. That is the first useful thing you have said in 10 minutes. He nodded. I hated that he looked relieved I had not walked away yet. But before I go, I said, I need to hear you say it clearly. Julian's eyes lifted to mine. Say what? No careful wording. No softened version. No, I noticed you. Tell me exactly what you did. The music continued behind us, soft and elegant, completely mismatched with the conversation. Julian stood slowly, keeping several feet between us. I looked for places where I thought you might be. My jaw tightened. Keep going. I attended public events because I knew you might be there. Keep going. I took photographs of you without asking. And he took a breath. I wrote down things I noticed about you. My stomach twisted. And his voice dropped. I kept doing it even after I knew I should stop. There it was. No excuse. No elegant phrasing. Just the truth. I folded my arms. Why? Julian looked genuinely ashamed now. Because every time I told myself I would talk to you, I found another reason not to. Then observing you became easier than risking a real conversation. So you chose control. He flinched slightly. Yes. You chose knowing things about me without giving me the chance to know anything about you. Yes. I shook my head. That is not connection, Julian. I know. I gave him a look. Sorry. For one ridiculous second, I almost smiled. I did not. And what exactly did you expect tonight? I asked. Forgiveness. No, a date. No, then what? Julian looked toward the crowded ballroom, then back at me. Consequences. The answer surprised me enough that I went still. Explain. I arranged the seat because I knew I had to tell you the truth while you still had complete freedom to walk away. I thought if I saw your reaction, maybe I would finally stop pretending what I was doing was harmless. His voice stayed quiet. And if you decide you never want to see me again, I will accept that. I studied him for several seconds. You really planned this entire evening just to confess and possibly lose any chance of speaking to me again. Yes. That might be the most complicated apology I have ever received. A faint, tired smile appeared. It is the only one I knew how to make. I looked at the phone still lying on the table. Then I looked back at him. If you actually mean any of this, prove it. Julian's expression sharpened. How? I pointed toward the phone. Show me everything. Julian did not touch the phone right away. He looked at me first, and for a moment I thought he might finally refuse something. Everything, he asked. Everything. His eyes dropped to the table. All right. He picked up the phone, unlocked it, and handed it to me without trying to control what I opened. That mattered more than I wanted it to. I sat back down, mostly because standing over a man while auditing his questionable life choices felt unnecessarily dramatic, even for a wedding. The folder with my name was still open. I scrolled slowly. Photographs, notes, dates from public events, a list of places where we had crossed paths. Nothing from my apartment, nothing from my family, nothing that suggested he had entered spaces I considered private. I did not relax, but I did breathe. You never followed me home? I asked. No, never contacted my clients. No, never asked Daniel for my address. Julian shook his head. No, never tried to get into my social media accounts. No, I looked at him. How am I supposed to know that? You are not. That answer caught me off guard. That is not reassuring. I am not asking you to be reassured because I say so. He nodded toward the phone. Check whatever you want. Ask Daniel. Ask the brides. Brother about the seating change. You should verify things yourself. I stared at him for a second. You are surprisingly reasonable for someone who created a folder about a stranger. I am aware of the contradiction. There it is again. Sorry. I kept scrolling. One note read, leaves early when rooms get too loud. Another said, pretends to enjoy networking, does not. I frowned. That one is offensive. Julian looked confused. Which one? Pretends to enjoy networking. It is accurate. That is what makes it offensive. A tiny smile appeared, then disappeared when he realized I was still holding evidence of exactly why we were having this conversation. Good instinct. I opened the oldest item in the folder. It was not a photograph of me alone. It was a scanned image from the design conference 2 years earlier. Daniel sat beside me near the loading entrance, smiling tiredly while I held 2 paper cups. A handwritten note appeared beneath the image. Caleb stayed until I felt steady again. He never asked for anything. I looked up. Daniel wrote this? Yes. Why do you have it? He sent it to me after I asked who you were. My chest tightened. And this is where it started. Yes. I looked at the picture again. I barely remembered that conversation. To me, it had been maybe half an hour. To Daniel, apparently, it had meant enough to save. He was having a rough day, I said. He was having a rough year, Julian replied quietly. His husband had moved into assisted care 3 months earlier. Daniel was trying to pretend he was managing everything. The answer softened something in me before I could stop it. I hated that. So because I sat with your friend, you became curious. Yes. Then curious became watching. Yes. And watching became this. I lifted the phone slightly. Julian nodded. Yes. I leaned back. You understand that a meaningful beginning does not excuse what came after. Completely. Good. I opened the notes again, then stopped at one entry from 6 months earlier. Do not go closer. Let him have his day. I stared at it. What is this? Julian's expression changed. A reminder to myself. Why did you need a reminder? He looked down. Because I had realized I was turning observation into habit. His voice was quieter now. That was the point when I knew I had crossed a line. I read the note again. Then why did you keep the folder? Because deleting it felt like pretending I had not done it. That answer sat heavily between us. I handed the phone back. And tonight? Tonight was supposed to end the habit one way or another. Meaning, Julian looked at me directly. If you tell me to delete everything, I will. If you tell me to never contact you again, I will. If you want to ask Daniel whether any part of my story is true, I will give you his number. I studied him. No bargaining. No dramatic speech. No telling me this was all because you cared. Julian's jaw tightened. Caring badly is still behaving badly. That was the first sentence all evening that left me with nothing sarcastic to say. I looked back at the folder. Then I looked at him. Deleted. Julian did not hesitate. He opened the folder, selected every photograph and every note, and paused only long enough to ask, all of it. All of it. His thumb pressed the screen. The folder disappeared. 2 years of silent observation gone in less than 5 seconds. I expected him to look devastated. He looked relieved. Why are you smiling? I asked. Julian let out a breath. Because for the first time in 2 years, I am not carrying information about you that you never gave me. For a few seconds, I watched Julian's face, trying to decide whether relief made him easier to understand or more confusing. He had just deleted 2 years of photographs and notes without bargaining, without asking me to reconsider, and somehow that simple act felt more honest than everything he had said before it. You really meant it, I said, about ending this tonight. Julian nodded. Yes. Even if ending it meant I walked away. Especially then. I looked toward the dance floor, where couples were laughing beneath strings of warm lights. The whole room felt almost offensively cheerful. You know what bothers me most? I asked. I can guess, but I should probably stop doing that. I gave him a look. Good answer. He waited. You made decisions for me, I said. Not huge decisions. Not dramatic ones. But you decided I was someone worth watching. You decided knowing little things about me was harmless. You decided sitting beside me tonight was the right way to fix it. Julian's expression tightened. You are right. And even now, you keep trying to solve this like a problem. That is probably because I solve problems for a living. I know. He blinked. I almost smiled. Daniel mentioned you were a lawyer when we met. So now you know one thing about me. Congratulations. We are practically acquaintances. That earned the smallest laugh, but I was not finished. A good reason does not turn a bad choice into a good one. Julian's smile disappeared. I agree. Daniel mattered to you. I helped him. Fine. That explains why you noticed me. It does not explain why you kept collecting pieces of my life instead of saying hello. Julian looked down at the table. No, it does not. Then say what it was. His fingers curled slightly against his knee before relaxing again. Fear. I frowned. Of me. Of being wrong about you. Of discovering that the version of you I had built in my head was not real. He paused. And eventually, fear that if I introduced myself, I would have to admit how long I had already waited. I let that sit between us. So you chose the safer version. For me, yes. Not for me. His eyes lifted. No, there it was. The part one needed him to understand. That is the line you crossed, I said. You protected yourself by removing my choice. Julian went very still. I had not thought of it exactly that way. You should. I will. The answer came without defensiveness, which made it harder to stay angry in a clean, uncomplicated way. I sighed and rubbed my forehead. This is exhausting. I am sorry. Do not apologize every 30 seconds either. It starts sounding like punctuation. A faint smile appeared. Understood. I looked at him. And do not say you understand unless you actually do. He nodded once. Then let me try again. I was interested in you. And instead of risking rejection, I created distance where I could control the situation. That was unfair. Deleting the folder does not erase that. My shoulders loosened slightly. Better. I am learning. Slowly. Fair. I leaned back in the chair and studied him. So what happens now? Julian looked almost surprised by the question. You decide. That is very convenient. It is also true. And if I say never speak to me again, his face changed, but only for a second. Then I will not. If I say leave tonight, I will leave. If I say I need 10 minutes alone, I will stay here. I watched him carefully. You have thought about this. For 2 years. That part is not helping. He gave a quiet, embarrassed laugh. Then I stood. I need those 10 minutes. Julian immediately nodded. All right. I started toward the terrace doors, then stopped and looked back. He was still seated. No movement. No attempt to follow. For the first time since I sat beside him, I realized he was finally doing the one thing he should have done from the beginning. He was letting me choose. The terrace was quieter than I expected. Cool night air moved across my face, carrying the faint smell of rain and distant traffic from the street below. I rested both hands on the railing and stared at the city lights, trying to organize thoughts that had absolutely no interest in being organized. Julian had watched me for 2 years. That sentence still sounded impossible. Worse, it sounded personal. I had spent most of my adult life trying to be forgettable in crowded rooms. Show up, do the work, leave before anyone expected too much. Somehow, a man I barely knew had noticed the exact habits I used to disappear. That should have made me furious. It did. But underneath the anger was something more complicated, and I hated complicated. Complicated required reflection. Reflection required emotional maturity. I had hoped to spend the evening eating cake. I checked the time on my phone. 3 minutes. Julian had promised me 10. I glanced through the glass doors. He was still sitting at the table. He was not watching the terrace. He was talking to an older guest beside him, his body turned completely away from me. I looked away quickly, annoyed by how much that mattered. "You are ridiculous," I muttered to myself. A woman passing behind me gave me a concerned glance. "Not you," I said. She walked faster. Excellent. Now I was frightening wedding guests. I turned back toward the city. The problem was not that Julian had feelings. People were allowed to have feelings. The problem was what he had done with them. He had turned curiosity into information and information into control, because control protected him from rejection. I understood that more than I wanted to. I had done smaller versions of the same thing my entire life. Avoid the conversation. Imagine the outcome. Decide what someone probably thought before giving them a chance to say it. But understanding the instinct did not mean accepting the behavior. That distinction felt important. My phone buzzed. A message from Stephanie, the bride. "Everything okay?" I stared at it. There was no version of the truth that fit comfortably into a wedding text. I typed yes. Just needed air. She responded with a heart and a reminder that cake was being served in 15 minutes. Finally, a problem I understood. I stayed outside until the full 10 minutes passed. When I returned, Julian was exactly where I had left him. He looked up only when I reached the table. 10 minutes, he said. You counted. I was trying very hard not to. I sat down. Good. Because counting would have been concerning. Understood. I gave him a look. That word is becoming dangerous too. A small smile appeared. I will retire it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said, I thought about what you said. Julian's expression became serious. All right. I still think what you did was wrong. Yes. And I do not trust you. His eyes lowered briefly. That is reasonable. But I also think you finally understand why it was wrong. He looked back at me. I am starting to. Starting is better than pretending. Julian nodded. Agreed. I leaned forward slightly. So here's what happens now. You do not tell me anything else you already know about me. All right. You do not anticipate what I want. All right. You do not arrange another situation where I have to interact with you. Absolutely. And if you want to know something about me, you ask. Julian went quiet. Ask. Yes. It is a revolutionary system people have been using for centuries. That finally made him laugh. It was soft and brief, but real. I can try that. Good. He hesitated, then looked almost uncertain. Can I start now? I folded my arms. Depends on the question. Julian took a breath. What do you actually enjoy doing when nobody expects anything from you? I stared at him for a second. It was such an ordinary question that it almost disarmed me. No secret knowledge. No observation. Just curiosity placed openly between us. I draw, I said. Not for clients. Just for myself. Julian smiled slightly. What do you draw? I felt something in my chest loosen. You were getting ahead of yourself. Was that too many questions? One at a time. He nodded. One at a time. And for the first time that evening, talking to Julian did not feel like discovering what he knew. It felt like deciding what I wanted him to learn. The rest of the reception became strangely normal, which might have been the most unsettling development of the entire night. Julian asked questions. Actual questions. No guessing. No finishing my sentences. No casually revealing that he already knew the answer. When I told him I liked drawing old buildings, he asked why. When I said I preferred diners to expensive restaurants, he asked what I usually ordered. Pancakes, I said. At night. Especially at night. Julian nodded solemnly. I respect the commitment. Careful. That sounded almost like approval. Am I allowed to approve of pancakes? We are still establishing policy. He smiled, and for a few minutes I forgot how bizarre our introduction had been. Then I remembered the deleted folder, and the warmth in my chest cooled enough to keep me grounded. This was not forgiveness. It was a conversation. There was a difference. My turn, I said. Julian lifted an eyebrow. You are asking me something? Do not sound so honored. I will try. I studied him. What do you do when you are not working? He hesitated, and suddenly I understood how unfamiliar this must feel to him too. He had spent 2 years collecting information while revealing almost nothing. Now he had to participate. I build miniature houses, he said. I stared. You what? Architectural models. For clients. No. For myself. I laughed before I could stop myself. That is unexpectedly wholesome. Julian looked mildly offended. I am capable of wholesome activities. You arranged a stranger's wedding seat to confess that you had been watching him. That is a strong counterargument. I smiled into my glass. Why miniature houses? He looked toward the windows. Because they are quiet. Real life is full of negotiations. Models are simple. You decide what belongs where. The sentence revealed more than he probably intended. I leaned back. You really like control. Julian's expression changed. Yes. No excuse. Just yes. And that is part of what went wrong with me. Yes. I appreciated that he did not try to turn the answer into something prettier. The band changed songs, and several couples moved onto the dance floor. Julian glanced toward them, then immediately looked back at me. He did not move. He did not assume. I noticed. Of course I noticed. You can ask, I said. His mouth curved slightly. Would you like to dance? I considered him for several seconds. One song. One song. We stood. Julian waited until I stepped closer before offering his hand. Even then, his touch was careful, almost formal. We moved with the crowd beneath the warm lights, leaving enough space between us that I never felt trapped. You look terrified, I said. I am trying very hard not to violate any newly established policies. I laughed. You are allowed to breathe. Thank you. That was not official permission. I will risk it. I shook my head, smiling despite myself. The strange thing was that this version of Julian felt nothing like the man I had imagined when I first opened that folder. He was awkward, careful, almost painfully aware of every choice. Maybe that was temporary. Maybe people behaved differently when they were trying to earn trust. I did not know yet. And for once, not knowing felt healthy. The song ended. Julian stepped back immediately. Thank you, he said, for the dance. For letting me meet you properly. The words settled. Somewhere quiet inside me. I looked at him and realized that was exactly what tonight had become. Not a romance. Not a clean slate. A first meeting that should have happened 2 years ago. Do not make it sentimental, I said. I will try. Good. I started back toward the table, then glanced over my shoulder. And Julian? Yes. You are buying the pancakes if we ever get that far. He smiled. If you ask me to, I will. This time I smiled back. By the time the reception began winding down, the ballroom looked softer somehow. Half the candles had burned low, the band was packing up, and guests were slowly trading champagne glasses for coats and goodbye hugs. Julian and I stood near the entrance while I checked my phone for my rideshare. 3 minutes, I said. That is efficient. It is also expensive because apparently everyone in the city decided to attend a wedding tonight. Julian smiled. Worth it. I looked back toward the ballroom. Ask me tomorrow. He nodded, and I noticed something immediately. He did not ask whether there would be a tomorrow. He did not assume. He simply accepted the answer I had given him. That tiny restraint mattered more than it probably should have. So, Julian said after a moment, what happens now? You go home. Reasonable. I go home. Also reasonable. And nobody rearranges any furniture, seating charts, social calendars, or transportation plans involving me. His mouth curved. That seems specifically directed at me. You have earned specificity. Fair. My car was still 2 minutes away. I reached into my jacket pocket and found one of the small ivory wedding cards Stephanie had placed at every table. I borrowed a pen from the guest book station and wrote my phone number on the back. When I turned around, Julian was watching me with cautious curiosity. I held out the card. He stared at it. Caleb, do not make this dramatic. I was going to ask if you were sure. I considered him. That is actually allowed. Are you sure? I looked at the number, then back at him. No, his expression fell slightly. But I am choosing it anyway. That brought the faintest smile to his face. I can respect that. Good? Because there are rules. Naturally. You do not use this number to investigate anything about me. Agreed. You do not message Daniel for advice about what I like. Agreed. You do not magically appear anywhere I mention. Agreed. And if I do not answer immediately, you do not panic and assume I hate you. Julian paused. That one might require practice. I laughed. At least you are honest. He accepted the card carefully, like it was something more fragile than paper. What am I allowed to do, he asked. Ask. That's simple. Apparently, it is revolutionary. My car pulled up to the curb. I opened the rear door, then stopped. Julian. Yes. Tonight does not erase the last 2 years. His expression became serious. I know. And giving you my number does not mean I trust you yet. I understand. I raised an eyebrow. You retired that word. Right? Sorry. I smiled despite myself. You can earn trust. Slowly. Julian nodded. Slowly sounds fair. I got into the car and closed the door. He stayed exactly where he was. No following. No waving me down. No last-minute speech. Just a man standing beneath the warm lights of the venue, holding a small card and finally letting me leave on my own terms. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at the message. May I ask you something? I smiled before I could stop myself and typed back. You may. A second message appeared. May I buy you coffee tomorrow? I looked out the window at the city sliding past, thinking about every strange choice that had brought us to this point. Then I answered. Coffee. Public place. You ask questions. No secret notes. His reply came almost immediately. Deal. I laughed quietly and put my phone away. For 2 years, Julian had tried to know me without speaking to me. Tonight, for the first time, he had finally learned the difference between watching someone and meeting them.